This is Center Stage, putting your firm in the spotlight by highlighting business owners and other industry experts to help take your firm to the next level. Hey everyone, and welcome to Center Stage. I'm your host, John Henson, and this week we are talking about some different ways that you could get your foot in the door with some different media sources. And you could really use this as a tool to show off your authority, your expertise, always talking about the benefit of that, especially as you build a brand as the go-to authority, and leaning on various media outlets is a great way to enhance that and to do that. And look, there's a ton of media outlets out there, and they are always looking for that expert insight to come in and help explain a situation. So lawyers, financial experts, all that kind of stuff, those are people that are needed in those roles. And so to help us out and provide some tips on how to become more involved in this, we are joined by media relations expert, Janet Falk. Janet, thanks for joining us this week.
My pleasure. Very happy to be here, John.
Awesome. So yeah, before we dive in, quick introduction, who are you? What's your background? Why are you the expert to talk about this?
Sure. I'm a public relations professional, and I've worked in the field for more than 30 years. I've worked on Wall Street and with nonprofits, with public relations agencies. I've been in-house on staff, and I've been a consultant. And now I work with attorneys, primarily attorneys who have either a solo practice or are part of a small firm under 100 attorneys. I do
Awesome.
a variety of things for them. I help introduce them to the media, as you say. But before we do that, we want to make sure that your LinkedIn profile and your website are up to snuff, because that is the first place that a reporter is going to go to check out whether this attorney is worth talking to or not. So that's an additional service that I provide. And I also help attorneys to place articles in legal publications, to be sure, but also in the trade and industry publications that their clients and prospects are going to be reading and thinking, that attorney knows what's going on. I should talk to that person.
Awesome. So yeah, just kind of starting out, why is it important to build relationships with media sources specifically?
Reporters are always looking for someone who knows what's going to happen before it happens. They know what happened already. And so they're going to be looking for a source who has their finger on the pulse of the industry and understands the trends and also the challenges and the difficulties that business owners or individuals or corporations are going to face, because laws are changing all the time, and also local municipal regulations are changing all the time. And so they want to know what is going to be the consequence of that for people in their industry or people in their community. So how do you introduce yourself to a reporter and show that you are that person that understands that there's a change afoot and people should be alert, and this is what they ought to do? That's the question.
Yeah. So, is it more of a balance between proactive and just kind of already being on the list? So it's like, you see a change happening and you want to reach out to a source to give that expertise, or is it more like, I don't want to say getting in the good graces, but getting in that network and getting on that reporter's list so that they reach out to you first when they're already working on a story? Which is it, or is it kind of a balance of both?
It's really both. It's really both, because you might be aware that certain trends are happening or certain, changes are going to take place because you're in touch with, what's happening in the legal industry and how it's going to play out across different business sectors. So say, for example, I'm here in New York City, and recently they had some changes where they were going to require employers to provide sexual harassment training for their employees, right? So it may be that you are in touch with your local city council member who's serving on that committee, and you know that this change is coming, and you know that it's going to affect businesses of a certain size. So that's one way that you can call out and reach out to the reporter in advance and say, this is coming down the pike and this is something that's going to affect these kinds of businesses, and I can speak to that issue. But on the other hand, it may be that the reporter also is alert to some change or gets aware of some situation. And who are they going to call? Reporters call the people they know. They don't call an attorney that they've never heard of. So if you want to be that attorney that the reporter is going to call, then you have to professionally introduce yourself to the reporter so that in that moment, or when the time comes, that they will say, aha, I remember I have this attorney contact who focuses on, these kinds of issues. Let me call that person. So it works both ways. You can be alerting the reporter to something that's happening now or is about to happen, or the reporter can be looking for someone who can knowledgeably and in language that a person will understand, whether they're an individual or a business owner, that they are going to expect a change. And this is how they can prepare for that.
Cool. So how does someone get that process started? Like, let's say that someone doesn't know anyone and they're on a completely blank slate. How then do you get the process started of getting connected with reporters? And is it different between like TV reporters versus a journalist, and how all of that works out?
Okay. I have a format that I use. I call it a media profile, and I hope we'll be able to include it in the show notes. And basically, what a media profile does is it answers 3 questions that the reporter is going to ask. The first question is, why you? How does the reporter know why they should be talking to you and not your colleague down the hall or your competitor across town? So you have to serve notice that you are knowledgeable and accessible and know what's going on in that particular industry or in that particular market. So that's why you. Then the second question is, why now? What is happening now that you're getting in touch with the reporter? Because they never heard of you before last month or last week. So what is it that's causing you to reach out to them in this moment? And then the third question, and this is the most important question, right? Why you? Why now? And the third question is, why should anyone care, right? How does your idea or your insight help an individual or a business owner or even a corporation to save time, save money, and make more money? Now, you remember, John, I told you I worked on Wall Street. So that's why I think about save time, save money, and make more money. But that is really what an attorney is going to do in many instances. They're going to have the back of their client and make it so that their client is going to stay out of trouble and won't be facing any kind of, litigation or any kind of, feedback from their own customers because they didn't handle a situation well. So when you have your media profile, you're going to be answering these questions. The first part of the media profile is to provide your contact information, your name, your phone number, your email address, your street address. And then the next part is going to be 3 to 5 sentences that say you have a practice that focuses on, broadly speaking, it's transactional or it's litigational, or you focus on certain kind of industries and so on. Then the next section is going to delve a little more deeply and talk about specific areas of your practice, right? So say you were an attorney with a practice in environment. So do you deal with, environmental cleanup costs and on the defense side? Or do you deal with representing community groups that are advocating for more environmental mandates, right? So you're going to give 3 to 5 bullet points that are going to be more specific about the kinds of transactions or the kinds of litigations or the kinds of counsel that you give to your clients. Now, the next part is called what I call hot trends, things that are flying under the radar that if only people knew, they would save time, save money, and make more money, but they're not paying attention. And the reporter needs a sophisticated attorney who can explain things in a succinct and clear way so that their readers or their audience are going to understand that. Now, I also like to add to this a quote, something that's a little snappy that says, people need to focus on complying with this regulation by such and such date. And that means that they have to gear up with the marketing department and the operations team so that everything will fall into place. So if you have a quote that basically gives the sense of what is the current status and what is about to change, then the reporter will see that there is a person there, not just a piece of paper that they're receiving about who this attorney is and what the attorney wants to talk about. And finally, at the bottom, you have who the person should contact to talk with you further, because you're a very busy attorney and you can't be taking all these calls. So either you have an administrative assistant or you have a public relations consultant who's working with you and is going to take the calls. So if you have a media profile that focuses on why you, why now, why should people care? Because if they only knew what John and Janet know, they would save time, save money, make more money. And then you would contact reporters with this information so that they would either think of you in the moment because they see that this is a hot topic, or they would have you on file for when that moment comes along. Now, you don't have to take my word for this. I can quote you more or less from a reporter who once said that he wanted a 50-word description of what an attorney knows about a subject to decide whether it is worth calling that attorney. So I'm giving you this idea. I'm giving you the format of what you should do. We'll have it in the show notes. You can work it up and ask me for a complimentary consultation. I'm happy to oblige. But here is a reporter that says, I want you to tell me what you know about something so that I can make a decision whether to call you and not call anybody else who might be able to say something similar. Now, this works for print, this works for online, this works for television. Reporters are always looking for sources who can have an idea of what it is that they should be looking at. And especially, they want to be talking to people that are new, right? Because that person is going to bring a different perspective. So that's how you introduce yourself as a professional, with a document like a media profile that identifies your contact information, describes your background briefly, and then gives ideas about what it is that you could be talking about, because they're flying under the radar and no one is paying attention, but people need to know.
Yeah. And then, and one of the things that you kind of mentioned earlier on is that these reporters, once they get that information, they're then going to kind of do their own research on you, and they're going to kind of verify that, see if you are a good person to reach out to and talk about. So they're going to look at maybe your LinkedIn profile, maybe your website or whatever. So what are some things that lawyers should definitely make sure that they either clean up or make sure that they add, and where they should be doing this, whether it's LinkedIn, website, or some other place?
Okay. One thing that I focus on when I'm talking to my clients is to make sure that your LinkedIn headline does not say attorney. No one is looking for an attorney. They're looking for an environmental attorney who specializes, or I shouldn't say specialize, an environmental attorney who advises companies in cleanup costs, right? So, that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for an attorney. They're not looking for a partner. So the first thing you should do is you should clean up your LinkedIn headline so that it includes keywords for a person who is searching for such a resource as a legal professional will be able to find. Second thing that I think you should do is that you should think like a reporter. A reporter uses the 5 W's. John, you know the 5 W's, don't you?
Oh man, I was in journalism school. Give me a refresher. It's been a while.
Who,
what, where, why, and when.
What? Who, what, when, where, why. Right. So you want to make sure that you're addressing the issues of the day and thinking about who is it that is going to need to know this information? What is it that they're going to need to understand? What is it that's keeping them up at night? But more than what is it that's keeping you up at night, what is it that you want them to do, right? You want them to call you. You want them to click on a link so that they will email you. You want them to download something that you have on your website. So you've got the who, you've got the what, then when. You have to think about what you're telling people. Is this particularly time sensitive, right? Remember, I gave the example of, people would have to go through sexual harassment training in New York, right? This is a couple of years ago, but there was a deadline for that. But maybe if you're a trust and estates attorney, it's really an eternal issue, right? Things that people need to think about, all year long, all the time. And then where are they going to look for this information? You have to make it accessible on your website so that people will be able to find it. And then, of course, why should they care, right? Because you're going to help them save time, as I say, save time, save money, and make more money. So I want to make sure that in your LinkedIn headline and on your website, you are addressing those issues, right? Making it clear, who it is that you're talking to, what they care about, what they should do next in order to, follow up on that concern. Is it time sensitive or not? Is it a perennial issue? Where else can they find that information on your website, and why they should care? So those are things that I advise my clients to address in terms of their digital assets, both their website and their LinkedIn profile and LinkedIn headline especially.
Awesome. So I mean, and maybe this is different, but I'm guessing that maybe the first time you reach out to a reporter, they may not choose you in that scenario, or they may not choose you for that story. So, obviously what we tell our clients in terms of how they market to their clients is you have to create consistent touch points. You have to, reach out on a regular basis. I would assume that your relationship with media outlets and reporters would probably work in a similar way. Where is the line then in terms of, how often do you reach out about
Right.
various stories? When is that appropriate, and how often is it appropriate to reach out to a reporter?
Okay, so if you're just introducing yourself as a source, then you send that as an email, and we can talk about how to find a reporter's email in a minute. So you send that as an email, and then I would recommend as a follow-up that you send an article that you've written so that they would see that you're actively working in the field. You can also do the reporter a favor, and that is when you see their stories in the news, then you can click on the link, share the link, comment on it, and make a LinkedIn post about it. Say, as was recently discussed by reporter John Hinson, this is a hot issue in our community, and here's my suggestion. So now you're doing the reporter a favor. You are sharing their news story. You're going to give more clicks to that link to the online article. And, they're going to see that because you're going to name them in your LinkedIn post. And then they're going to want to know, who is this person? What do they know about this subject? Why are they so interested in it? Aha, they had this comment. I should look at this a little more closely. Now, your media profile, since you're talking about hot issues, does not have to change that often. You can change it maybe every 4 months or so. I mean, really, how often is a hot issue going to rise up and capture everybody's attention, right? So you don't have to do it all that often. But if there is something that suddenly becomes an issue, then yes, you should identify yourself and reach out in that way. So if you want, I can share an example about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm sure you remember the Boston Marathon bombing case, and it recently came back into the news because the person who was convicted, the Tsarnaev fellow, has been granted a death sentence, right? So it's back in the news. Well, I remember reading at the time, different attorneys were commenting on the case when the trial was underway. Now, naturally, you would expect that some of them were from the Boston area, right? And so there were two attorneys in particular who were from McDermott, Will, and Emery, who are being quoted all the time. But when it came time to the verdict, there was a story that I read that quoted an attorney from Miami. And you're thinking, Miami, what's he doing in the mix, right? So I think this is what happened. This attorney got in touch with all the reporters who were following the subject and said, the verdict is coming. If it's guilty, it means this. If it's not guilty, it means that. I am a former federal prosecutor. I have tried terrorism cases. And here's my phone number. Here's my cell phone number. Here's my email address. Contact me at any hour of the day or night, right? So this fellow, my guess, or his public relations consultant, identified why you, right? Former federal prosecutor, tried terrorism cases. Why now? Because the verdict is coming. Everybody wants to know. Why should people care? Because this is a big case. Everybody's talking about it. And that's how an attorney from Miami can talk about a case in Boston, right? So
Yeah.
if you become aware of a situation, you can use the same approach of the media profile to identify yourself as someone who has something to say in the moment that people really care about. So it may be that you're updating your media profile 3 times a year as new issues arise, or it may be that you're supporting the reporter by sharing the link to their stories, or it may be that you've written something yourself that you think aligns with what the reporter is covering. And so you want the reporter to see any report or client alert or blog post or a newsletter and so on. So those are the ways that you can be supporting a reporter and reinforcing that you are the one that the reporter should call.
Nice. So, all right. So let's say we've sent out the media profile. Let's say that a reporter has reached back out to us and they want to get a quote, get our insight, get our perspective on an issue that's happening right now. What kind of tips do you have for someone who's being interviewed, whether it's on camera or over the phone or even via email? Because I know that happens too.
Right. I mean, over email is great because then you have control over what you're going to say and when you're going to say it, and you have proof that you said it.
Right.
No, so yeah, that's a good thing. And, and I've had occasion to do that from time to time. The first thing is you want to make sure that you're the one calling the reporter so that you have some measure of control. You don't want a reporter to be calling you out of the blue and you don't know what's going on and they want to ask you about some client and you don't know what the issue is. I mean, let's just say you think that the workers at the client's manufacturing plant are organizing in a union. And that's what you're focused on, right? But it turns out that it's something completely different. There was a shooting in the parking lot. Okay, so what are you going to say? You don't know anything. The reporter knows more than you do at this point. So you want to make sure that you are the one calling the reporter. So if you get a spontaneous call, don't think it's for a certain reason because it may be for something very different. And in that case, this is what I recommend. I'd really like to talk with you, but I'm on deadline. Let me take your phone number and your email address, and I will get back to you in a half an hour, just in case I need to talk to someone else, because I want to be more helpful to you, right? You want to team up with the reporter and be more helpful to you. So you get the reporter's phone number and you get the reporter's email address, and now you have bought yourself a half an hour of time. And you ask the reporter, what exactly do you want to talk about? Because I may have to talk with someone else to get more information and be more helpful to you. So now you have narrowed the scope of what it is that you're going to talk about. Now, John, there's no news story that's so important that it can't wait a half an hour. And in that half an hour, this is what you're going to do. You're going to call up the client and say, what in blazes is going on here? I got a call from a reporter and so on. We have to, get everything together here. So then you're going to call the reporter back, right? So we've taken care of that. Now, when you're planning to talk to a reporter, whether it's in an emergency situation like the one I just described, or just an ordinary conversation because they want to know, what's going on and so on, this is what I recommend. First of all, a reporter is not your friend. A reporter is there to do her job or his job. And I don't care if you dated the reporter's cousin or you were in the same fraternity or sorority, a reporter is not your friend. So if you don't want to see it on the front page, don't say it. Right? Don't start saying on the record, off the record, background, deep background, not for attribution. Don't get yourself in trouble. If you don't want to see it anywhere, then don't say it. So a reporter is not your friend. That's the first thing. Okay.
Yeah.
The second thing is you want to think about what you're going to say in advance. So come up with what I call 3 message points about what it is that you want to make sure that you stress. And then for each of these message points, you want to make sure that you have something that will illustrate the message so that the reporter will be sure to follow along. So I call this the 4 A's. Okay, so the first A is acronym. You take an acronym that everybody knows, like ASAP, only you give it a little twist. So you say, as soon as profitable, instead of as soon as possible. Or if you're creative, you can make up your own acronym, in which case you'll have to explain what it is, which is even better.
Yeah.
That's the first A. Then the second A is analogy. You compare it to something that everybody knows, right? So you say, that's like a revolving door, right? It just goes round and round and, nobody stays there for very long. Then the third A is anecdote. So you give an example of something that everybody can latch onto and understand how this is going to play out. So you have acronym, analogy, anecdote, and then the fourth A is alliteration. What did I just do? Right? I gave you the 4 A's so that you can remember what it is that you're going to say. So you have your 3 message points, and for each one, you come up with something that will help you to be more memorable and more quotable using one of those 4 A's. Yeah. Now, oftentimes at the end of a conversation, a reporter will say, is there anything else you want to add? And that's the moment when you say, yes. And you look back at your list of 3 points and you say, I want to mention this second point here, right? Because you didn't have the chance to mention it in the course of the conversation, but you had those 3 points in front of you. And by the way, I recommend that you print those out in 16-point font so that they're nice and big and you won't be able to forget them and you'll be able to see them. And the reporter can't see what's on your desk, whether it's on the phone or on Zoom. You'll be able to go back to your 3 points and remember that you weren't able to talk about point number 2. And when the reporter says, is there anything else you'd like to add? That's when you drop in that point that you didn't get around to mentioning. So I hope that this is helpful in figuring out, how you take the call. You want to be the one who's calling, and what it is that you're going to prepare in advance during that 30 minutes when you get together with the client to figure out what you're going to say. And then you make yourself quotable and memorable and make sure that you cover all your points. Oh, and by the way, what would you say, John, if someone called you up about that shooting in the parking lot?
I will say, give me 30 minutes so I can.
No, I mean, 30 minutes are up. Now what are you going to say?
Oh, I mean, it all depends on the information that I get. I've got to make sure that I'm given the facts, and that I know for me specifically, because I was in journalism school. That was my first major in college. And one of the reasons that I ended up switching was because my journalism professor at the time, I ended up writing a story about a high school basketball game. And at one point in the game, there was a hard foul and, things got a little tense. And I mentioned that in the story. It was an inconsequential detail that I could have otherwise left out, wouldn't have changed the outcome of the story. But my professor, he took it and he gave me a really low grade because he said, you had a really interesting piece in here that should have been the focus. That tension should have been the focus of the entire story. And looking back on it, no, it absolutely was not. It was just another run-of-the-mill basketball game. But he wanted me to take a detail to make it more salacious, to make it more readable. And so, for me, especially now, if I'm going to be talking to a reporter, I need to feel like I need to be very careful about what I say, to not give them any sort of fuel to ignite a giant fire to make something be blown way out of proportion.
Right. Well, I would say that your professor was both right and wrong.
Oh, absolutely. On
I
a
mean, he
journalism
was
side of
wrong.
things, absolutely right.
No, I mean, he was wrong in having this salacious angle to it, but he
Mhm.
was right in the sense of what Anton Chekhov said. If you put a gun in the scene of a play in the first act, it better go off in the second.
Right.
Right? So if you were going to allude to something that potentially could have had consequences, then you should have developed it further. Otherwise, you shouldn't have
Right.
mentioned it. Right.
Exactly.
So that's it. So here's what you would say. Your 3 message points, as you first said, is, these are the facts as we know them. Okay, so we're going to say that. Okay. The second point is going to be, we're very sorry that there's been a loss of life, and we're going to do what we can in order to make it up to the family of this employee. We're going to create a college scholarship fund for their children. Right. So the first one is, we're dealing with the situation. These are the facts. The second one is, this is how we're going to make it up. And then the third is, we're cooperating with the authorities. And as we get more information, we will be in touch with you. Make sure that I have your contact information. So that way you show that you're on the ground, you're dealing with the situation, you're dealing with the human heartbreak, and we're cooperating with the authorities so that we can, be in touch with you and continue to deliver you the facts as they become more available.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I think that covers a wide range of at least definitely getting started for sure, getting comfortable, getting interviewed and all of that. Before we wrap up, how can people reach out to you and work with you if they're interested in developing some more of those media relationships?
Oh, sure. I'm happy to do that, but I did allude to something,
Yes.
going back to point number 2. So
Yes.
I want to make sure that we talk about that. And that is, how do you find these reporters and how do you find their email address?
Yes.
Okay. So the first thing is that a number of newspapers and magazines put the name and the email address of the reporter at the end of the article. And why did they do that? Because they want you to get in touch with them. Now, I happen to know that the Washington Post just these recent days stopped doing that. But you can contact the Washington Post at first.last@washpost.com. So many times you'll be able to figure out, what the email address is, because it's often, first initial, last name at nameofthepublication.com. But you should check at the end of the article, because many publications will make that available to you. The second way is, in magazines especially, there's a masthead, which is a list of all the reporters and the editors. And it often has their email addresses and the areas that they cover in terms of their news stories, called their beat. And it may even have their phone number. So you can look at the end of the article, or you can look on the masthead. Now, the third place you can look is on Twitter. A lot of reporters are very active on Twitter. And John, why do you think they put their email address in their Twitter bio?
To make it real easy to get in touch with them.
Exactly. They don't want you pitching a story to all of God's creation on Twitter. They want to know that you're going to contact them specifically and not anyone else who's going to write a similar kind of story. So you can look on their Twitter bio. And here's the fourth way. Many reporters have their own personal website, and they gather their news stories there so that they're all in one place. And guess what? They have a contact page where they give their email address, or they have a form. So those are the 4 places you can look to get in touch with a reporter. You can look at the end of the article, you can look at the masthead, you can look at their Twitter bio, or you can see if they have a dedicated website. And finally, if you can't find them there, you can look for them on LinkedIn, although many of them don't appreciate that. Or you can ask a person like me. I subscribe to an expensive media database where it has hundreds of thousands of publications and reporters. So I can look up that information. 1 or 2, it would be fine. Now, how to get in touch with me? I have my own website, which is Janet L as law, JanetLFalk.com. So you can go to my website and you can get a number of free resources in the library section. I have a newsletter I write monthly, and I focus on marketing and public relations issues for attorneys. So you can subscribe to that. And all my newsletters are on my website. So just because you're meeting me now this month, you can still read what I wrote in October. I treat all my subscribers the same. And I do offer a complimentary strategic communications consultation for a half an hour. So you can ask me about how to complete your media profile from the show notes, or how to deal with a situation that you anticipate when you're going to be filing a case in court. You want to create a press release so that you can generate a news story that might put pressure on opposing counsel, or if you want to publish an article, not only in a legal journal, but in an industry journal, and so on. So I'm happy to speak with your audience, John. I look forward to it.
Yeah, and and Janet has contributed a handful of articles to Spotlight Insider as well this year, and so just a wealth of really good information. Today's no different. A lot of great insight, a lot of good inspiration, especially for just building up media relationships. I think it really is an important part of just an overall marketing and branding strategy. I do have one final question for you, and it's one that we ask all of our guests here, and that is, if you had one final piece of advice for our audience out there, what would it be?
I would say it's never about you. It's always about the reader. So, so when you have a website that says, I am a great attorney, we are a great law firm, I'm sorry, but very few people care about that beyond your nuclear family. People want to listen to WIIFM, the world's greatest radio station. What's in it for me? They want to know what you can do for them. You can talk about yourself, but you can flip the turn a little, and you can say, clients rely on us. Clients ask me. Clients depend on me. And that way, you're not saying it about yourself. Clients are saying it about you, and the reader, who is your potential client, will be identifying with the client. So my piece of advice is, it's not about you. It's about the reader. And what is it that they are going to care about? As I said, the world's greatest radio station, WIIFM, what's in it for me?
Yeah, I love that. And it's one of those things where it's really gratifying and validating to hear that from other people, especially just when it's a part of the message that we're putting out, then to hear it from you. And then we've also heard it, from other people just in different forms, just talking about that whole, the Donald Miller story brand sort of aspect of it, where you are not the hero of the story. It's about your audience, or when you're talking to reporters, it's about the readers of that story. So always good to hear that. Thank you again so much for joining us. That'll do it for us here this week on Center Stage. Rate, review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on YouTube, and leave a review wherever you're consuming the show, Spotify, Pandora, wherever. We're all over the place. That's going to be it. Janet, thanks again for joining us and sharing some knowledge.
This was so much fun, John. I appreciate the opportunity.
Always.
Thanks for listening. To learn more, go to spotlightbranding.com/center stage.